Welcome to Cactus Crossfire, your go-to for hot takes and prickly debates.
Welcome in. How's everybody doing? How's our prickly pack? I'm Sisto and Eddie, your host of Cactus Crossfire, and with me, as always, is the well-lit and well-groomed Eddie Ablisser. Eddie, where you at?
Hey, Sisto, I'm out in the great state of Utah, and let's be clear, when Sisto says lit, we're talking about lighting in my podcast studio space, not the other type of lit. But I'm excited to join you, Sisto, at the home of 8688 Studios with the one and only Gabriel Baca. He doesn't even own a watch or a clock. This guy tells us what time it is. That's what I'm talking about.
God bless him for telling us what time it is, because we've been away from the pod for a while here. The last time we were on here, we were pretty much being very prickly. And now here we are at the beginning of February. That's why, Eddie, I'm wearing my pretty little pink tonight. Going to be New Mexico legislature is in full swing, and going to be.
What does pink have to do with February?
Well, because it's Valentine's Day, man. Valentine's Day is coming up. It's a huge holiday in my family.
Have you gotten something nice
for someone special? Yeah, my niece. I got her our annual. Our family has a tradition of giving. My dad used to come home from work and he would bring us those large, solid milk chocolate Hershey's Kisses, and so
big ones,
the big huge one, yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
We get those for my niece every year, and she gets them, and it's fun to watch a kid go through a massive Hershey Kiss.
Real talk, Sisto, those ginormous Hershey Kisses, I remember getting them and feeling so intimidated. And then it was always by like day 7 because it's sitting out in the air.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the brown starts going white.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is disgusting. But you keep eating it. It's so disgusting. You're breaking it apart. Everyone's touching their hands on this ginormous Hershey Kiss. And it's all white and getting all old. But you still eat it as a kid. Those were the fun days.
Those are fun days, buddy. Those are fun days. And we've got more of them coming ahead of us now. We're back in session here in New Mexico, getting things going. We're back here with a new season of Cactus Crossfire. And, we've been talking about what this new season is going to bring. And what we kind of realized over this new season, we're going to have a lot more interviews. We're going to be listening to, hearing what our prickly pack and their feedback is to us. And we're going to start talking about, the stories that maybe we think that the mainstream media is missing or missing out on. So, but at the same time, we're going to have, some interesting guests. I think this week we're going to have city councilwoman from Tempe, Bredetta Hodge,
Arizona.
Bredetta Hodge.
Bredetta Hodge. I'm so excited for that conversation, Sisto. That is my political roots. I mean, I am praying she doesn't come out with some nasty tea on me for the times that I served back in Tempe. But
So next week we're gonna have on the show a gubernatorial candidate here out of New Mexico and our district attorney for Bernalillo County, Sam Bregman.
I'm looking forward to that. I got to meet him last time I was up there in Santa Fe. Very nice guy.
Yeah, he's going to be back around. And also the other individual that we're going to have, a good friend of yours and mine, somebody that we work very closely with in her election, Democratic up-and-coming star in Reno, our very own good friend, Councilwoman Brandy Anderson. So that should be an interesting our next show. So
yay. Excited, Sisto. Those are great.
So, Eddie, our last episode that we were talking about, we're going to be talking about a lot of the things. We're going to be talking about the ICE shootings that have been happening. We're going to be talking about a little bit about the Epstein files, the government shutdown, Catherine O'Hara, the Texas special election, the winter storm that blew through the nation, ICE's detention and release, Dedmon Wilson, the Grammys, and maybe even a little bit of Super Bowl action here in the coming shows. So, I think we're going to have a pretty packed season this next season together. We're going to try to keep ourselves grounded in the tenets that we started this podcast with of talking about the major issues that are happening around us and the things that interest us, like those things that we just ran down. Today, Eddie, a lot of folks who have been watching this show have been wondering, who are these two guys? Where do they come from? What is their Democratic journey? How did they get into the Democratic Party? And, and how we got activated to become the handsome Democratic activists that we are right now.
Sisto.
Uh-huh.
I think one of the reasons why we have become the great people we are today is because there are no laws on stolen land, Sisto.
There are no laws on stolen land.
I do want to quote the infamous Ricky Gervais in saying, if you win an award, don't use it as a platform to make political speech. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. And most importantly, you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. End quotes. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Get on stage and they fondle their awards and pretend that they have had any education whatsoever in the intrinsic notions of policy and debate and government, and then it blows up all over social media. Now you have a tribe. I know we're going to talk about our stories, but there's a tribe that sent Billie Eilish a demand letter to give up her $15 million mansion land in Los Angeles because it's technically on their land. Mm-hmm. So you sort of get what you asked for there, Billy.
Well, I mean, I understand that people want to use their celebrity to try to make a difference or stand up for something that they feel passionately about. And I think that you and I have, and it's not just celebrities that are fondling their awards. Sometimes it's elected officials who are coveting their offices that you hear say very strange and interesting things in regards to the world of public policy. But I think that's only because, the public itself, I'm a firm believer in you get what you pay for, right? And what we have is a public that has gotten less and less engaged, less and less involved, not just in the electoral process, but within creating platforms for the Democratic Party, platforms for the Republican Party. And there's just this template cookie cutter stuff that just shows up, and that's where people roll. I mean, you and I started our journey together.
Yep.
Within the Democratic Party. I was from New Mexico. I was a young Democrat from New Mexico. You were a young Democrat from from Arizona. And you were kind of the precursor for all of us because, we kept looking up and, wow, there's this young guy who got elected at 20-something years old. How'd he get there? And we saw so many other people like you come after you. But one of the things that you and I always connected with about being these guys from the West was I used to playfully kid you and the Arizona delegation because at the time I think Janet Napolitano was your governor. And you guys were having this kind of Democratic resurgence. And I kept saying the only reason that Arizona Democrats are successful is because New Mexicans came in and started running your stuff. So, which could be also said true for today because we have a mayor of Phoenix who's also from Albuquerque. So I'm always grateful for when New Mexicans do well in other states, but there's something about those two states and the West and the Southwest that make us a little bit different than most other East Coast Democrats, where a lot of what you and I learned through Young Democrats is where a lot of public policy decisions are being made, right? And, we didn't always fit in that mold, right?
I'm glad you bring this up because one of the things that we're both dealing with in the political circles that we operate in is this notion of validity or purism that exists within the party. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, Jay Knapp, my favorite governor of all time, Jay Knapp, she let me call her Jay Knapp. But Janet Napolitano I learned so much from her. She was a force to reckon with. She elected as a Democratic governor, very moderate Democrat, mind you, in a very red Republican state. Taught me really great arts of negotiation with the majority party. And she also showed us that you don't have to be an insider within the party to rise the ranks. Sisto, one of the things that I remember vividly around my sort of like political youth engagement. I mean, there's two things here. One, there's not being accepted because you weren't part of party royalty, right? We've talked about this multiple times. I didn't come from, my dad was Democrat, my mom was Republican. When I was a young college student government at Arizona State University, the university that appears more times in the Epstein files than any other university in the country. So I think I might have to find a new university to call my alma mater. Nonetheless, I was a college Republican back in the days. I made some phenomenal relationships, both sides of the aisle, worked with a lot of great people. But I remember vividly when I was in grad school, finishing my master's program. Prior to that, I had come to know Pat Tillman through a lot of associated relationships. I didn't play football. Some of my great friends were on that 1996 Rose Bowl team that should have been national champs. But nonetheless, got to know Pat, this absolute like behemoth of a guy, just everyone loves him. Personality, bigger than life. You're around him, you have nothing but smiles on your face all the time. And he'll stand up, like he stands up for the things he cares about. He's passionate. He's just a phenomenal personality and man. And he goes off to join the military after the NFL, right? He made millions in the NFL, then goes to the military. And then Donald Rumsfeld and then George Bush, president, sort of creating a narrative around what happened to Pat Tillman. A lot of us, we're angry, like, oh my gosh, we got to rise to the challenge and really, avenge his death. There was friends of his that went off and joined the army to get involved. Then it came out that he was actually killed by friendly fire and some mistakes that happened in the military, which, sort of tarnishes the narrative of this hero status of Pat Tillman. And I remember at that moment, the intensity of anger I felt, like, come on, like, this is ridiculous. We need to protect our soldiers, but also angry at what's happening in Afghanistan. It was that moment that and let's be clear, Sisto, former college Republican at Arizona State University, a very conservative state, a very conservative district, decided this just doesn't sit right with me. And truth be told, it wasn't that I was this inflamed, passionate liberal that wanted to, drench myself in the party cloth. I was wanting to make a change. I'm going to join the Democratic Party, and I want to run, and I want to talk about what it means to be a student in this generation, what it means to grow your economy in a challenging world of what your degree looks like, and then also talk about federal international issues around war, primarily how we abuse the narrative people sometimes in the promulgation of a narrative to promote war. And so I decided to switch my party registration from Republican to Democrat. And it had a lot to do with that situation with Pat Tillman. There's no one else that's filed to run. So I looked at the local elected leaders. There wasn't anything at the city level I really cared about. There was something at the state level. And I'm like, this is perfect. Great way to get started. Talk about some international issues and things that hit my district, hit Tempe specific. And so there were two Republicans, Laura Knaprak, who I became friends with, and Mark Thompson, and both great people. And they were the state representatives at that time. And the top two win. And Meg Burton Cahill was running for state representative as well. And so I'm like, well, maybe I could be the second person in that race to work with Meg Burton Cahill.
Mm-hmm. Which sign is that behind you?
Well, that's going to be this one, the red, white, and blue state representative District 26 sign.
Okay.
That was my original branding that I had back in the day until I moved over and ran actually for state rep, and I switched my branding to this red on white. Mm-hmm. And you could see a couple of the t-shirts around me that represent that. But I ended up running, and it's actually this t-shirt behind my head. I got to move it this way. I don't know if you could see it, but it has Harry Mitchell for state senate, Meg Burton Cahill, in the middle on pink, and then Ablisser, and we ran together as a team. And I remember going down to the state party headquarters, and I walked in. I'm registered, and I said, I want to run for office. I want to run for Legislative District 26. Who do I need to meet? Who do I need to talk to? I was not accepted, Sisto. Day one, I remember walking into the Democratic Party headquarters right down on Central in Phoenix, not accepted. The first question, Sisto, what do you think the first question the party leaders asked me the moment I walked into the party headquarters? About what policy did they care about the most that I believed in?
Thinking back to the early 1990s, you're a young guy. College affordability?
Oh, I wish. I wish. That sounds like something that they should be asking me. No. They said, are you pro-choice?
Okay.
That's all they cared about.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I'm pro-choice. I mean, and I am. I do think there's complexities to that policy issue. I do think that there's nuance that should be discussed at a greater level, but 100%, I do not believe we criminalize the choice for a woman to make very, very grave decision with her body and her health and her future. And so I said yes. They walked me into another room, introduced me to people. I got started, but that type of initial entry didn't end there. So I had multiple people within the district push back on me because I was very religious in my approach to policy. My very religious in my volunteerism, in my advocacy. I utilize many aspects of faith. I mean, my PhD that I got at Arizona State University, the dissertation is about religion. It's about Christian faith and political policy. But I had multiple secularists and Democrats that really pushed back. These were their issues, right? They did not want religion infused into the social conversation. So I got pushed back from them. I got pushed back from folks that didn't think I should represent bills that dealt with women. No one sponsored the ratification of the ERA back in I guess it was 2006. So I sponsored that bill. And I remember I walked to a district meeting, Sisto, and a group of women said, how dare you, Eddie? How dare you run that piece of legislation? A woman should run that piece of legislation. And part of me just want to be like, duh, like, are you kidding me? But no one did. That's the point. No one did. None of the other women that were elected decided to use one of their bills to run for that. But I did. But yet I got criticized for that, Sisto. It just doesn't make sense. And, I was always an outsider. And that outsider status certainly is reflected today in the work that you and I do, trying to talk about the issues in a much more pronounced avenue, you and I debating facts back and forth, but doing it with reasonability and friendship and respect. But, I look at some of the trolls that jump on our social media feeds, and it is all sorts of purity tests from every single bizarre policy isolated circle that you have.
But Eddie, I mean, the funny part is that I've kind of been through this type of criticism and litmus tests, those criticisms that come through that we'd like to hear from people and everything else. I know that you catch a lot of heat on your side of the lane for it, but at the same time, I remember this when we started in YDs and MySpace was there and Facebook had just started, and people would attack us on those platforms.
Those platforms, I mean, I remember back in the day, Sisto, that being elected. I mean, I was on those getting some pretty crazy stuff, and I think this is pre-regulated, keep social media spaces. I mean, but let's be honest. I mean, right now it's still incredibly Wild West.
But it's through this format that we're going to be able to show people really who we are with it and have our own ideas actually expressed in a way that hopefully through time people are going to get to learn about it.
You had an issue. I mean, you wanted to run for office, you wanted to get involved, and there was a lot of gatekeeping that happens out in New Mexico as well.
Well, I mean, for me, it's different because, I grew up I didn't grow up in the big city of Albuquerque. I grew up in a small little town that's about 60 miles south of here. So if you blink while you're driving through it, you'll probably pass it. But it was in rural New Mexico. But where, my dad was very heavily involved in local Democratic politics. I mean, he was a precinct judge, a precinct chair, and, kind of a trusted voice in our community. People in the community would come to my dad and say, Guilford, who do we need to vote for? Because my dad grew up in the big city of Socorro, so he kind of knew the politics within the city limits of Socorro. My family does have a bit of a name in the county itself. I mean, we're just working class folks. I do have an ancestor who's on the original filing of the Constitution in the state of New Mexico. He was the original constitutional delegate, Eusebio Aveta. He was a part of that, but and from Socorro County, where I'm from. But that didn't mean anything because our family didn't really build a career off of being political. We just built a career off of being engaged and involved. My dad starts getting older. He doesn't want to do it as much. But he never just picked a Democrat or a Republican. Always just voted for the person that actually came and knocked on the door, came into the house, and they talked about the problems affecting my dad and the friends around him. And he'd kind of just have a general conversation. But there wasn't that litmus test of, these are the big issues. In my dad's world, it was, you're coming to talk to me about being sheriff. Are you going to put a substation here in this community? Are you going to have an active officer cruising around? Are you going to support us for our volunteer fire department? Are you going to do, X, Y, and Z? They supported Republican sheriffs. I remember growing up in the party, and in my neighborhood, there was a sheriff that had lived there. Back then in the sheriff's department, you had a sheriff that kind of monitored your little part of the county. And that sheriff was a great guy, Mike Mora. God bless him. I'll never forget him. Mike was a staunch Democrat his whole entire life. And then he switched his party to a Republican because he kept running for sheriff as a Democrat, could never get out of the primary. Then he wanted to run for sheriff as a Republican. They didn't give him a primary, and he won. Eventually,
Nice.
Then after that, he ran as a Republican, but for the county commission, and he won because he didn't have a Democratic primary. Now, did he have the same litmus test that you're talking about where the Democrats came to him? No, the Republicans just wanted to build a base at that time. That's when they started building their tents, right? They were building a tent in the 90s, after the, and this led to the, contract with America and when Newt Gingrich and all those guys. Those are the things my dad cared about and that he would ask. But once he got to a certain age, I knew that I wanted to get involved. So I went to my local county party and I drove into town. I got to know a lot of the learned members of the Democratic Party in Socorro County. One of them being Vangie Torres, this wonderful woman who had a tremendous career in the labor movement in New Mexico and had a tremendous career as a senior advocate. And she's like, come here, I'm going to show you how this gets done. And she got me at that first Democratic meeting that I showed up to. And she says, we're going to run you for county committee man, which meant that I would represent Socorro County to the state Democratic Party. And I felt really good about it. She says, I'm going to introduce you to all these folks and talking to everybody. And they ran this other guy from the inside of the city proper of Socorro. He ran against me. They took the vote. Votes were counted. I lost. I took it like a man. I went home. I got home so I come home from school the next day. Dad's standing out there waiting for me. And I'm like thinking in my head, oh my God, what did I do? I did something wrong. Pulls up and he goes, what happened last night? I said, nothing. I went to the meeting. He's like, did you run for something? I said, yes. He goes, and did you lose? And I said, yes. And he says, no, you won. Somebody called and there was a little hanky panky that happened with the vote. And my dad was like, this is BS. You're messing with my kid.
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of started my dad on a path of not trusting the party. I didn't turn my back on him as much as my dad did. I stayed involved. There was an adjoining county that I grew up in. I went to school in Valencia County. Went there, met some really great Democrats. They gave me a ton of access within the party. They were a part of that royalty that you talk about in the Democratic Party. And then I moved to Albuquerque after I transferred from my junior college to the University of New Mexico, and I met a great state representative who was only 10 years older than me. He was about your age at the time, but Eddie's not that much older than I am, but he was a little bit older. He was a little bit wiser, and he said, if you come volunteer my campaign, I'll teach you about campaigns. I'll teach you how to run a campaign. And that's where I started. And part of it is that, I had to take what I knew growing up in my small little town and turn it into urban politics. I blended the two, and that's kind of been my career, is blending different political structures and formats within the party, which has made me kind of weird within the party because, the folks in the party are like, you don't look like what we think our Democratic leaders should look like. You don't talk. I remember when I ran for Young Democrats president the first time, folks actually told me, Sisto, I lost the first time, and they said, Sisto, why don't you go and learn how the party works? Because right now you're a little rough around the edges. And I didn't understand what that meant. And what that meant was, what other people explained to me that meant is that you're not one of these, elitists that we can, you don't have this pedigree that we're looking for. And so in that drove me to say, okay, well, I know a heck of a lot more people who look like me in the Democratic Party that are outside of this room. Why don't I bring them all together and start building a coalition? And that's what I did. I built a coalition. First time I ran for president of the Young Democrats, people thought, honestly, that I was going to lose. They thought the party insiders had the line. They knew, it was a former U.S. senator's, one of his golden boys that was running. And I just ran talking to real people and telling them, hey, would you mind taking a couple of hours of your Saturday to show up and vote for me because I want to be president of the Young Democrats? And I will never forget it. There was probably about almost 150 people in the Plumbers Hall when we had that election. And when I won by 40 votes. I beat the guy by 40 votes.
Wow.
And awesome. But after that, my opponent, who I defeated, was not very happy about it. And I was constantly being criticized. Oh, he's from this part of town. He's part of this old guard of these old politicos, these old patrons. He's going to throw us back to all of that. And I really didn't have that in my mind. I really didn't have. I just knew that I could serve and represent people that look like me. And I remember calling former Congressman Bill Richardson and saying to him, I'm freaked out because, I grew up here and I'm being told that I can't be the leader of my party. I can't be a leader in my party being from here. And I'm tying this to Bill Richardson, who was not from New Mexico. He was born in Pasadena, and and he's saying, no. You have a place at the table, and I'm gonna help you, and I'm gonna talk to you, and we'll we'll work together, and we'll get you through this. But it was interesting because you're right. There were these litmus tests, and there have always been these litmus tests for yourself and me, but in different ways. I'm constantly amazed how on this show, folks that I talk to about the show and comment about the show, for years and years and years in New Mexico politics, I was the most moderate Democrat in the state, right? I'm one of the moderate Democrats. And it's funny, through this show, people are saying, oh, wow, Sisto, you really are progressive.
Because you got me to compare yourself to.
Well, I mean,
Sisto.
and that's the thing. I mean, compared to you, yeah, I'm more progressive. But at the end of the day, I'm not changing who I am on this show. I haven't changed who I am as a Democrat. You know, we both have come up through the party and we have developed a sense of who we are. People in the party have developed an idea of who you and I are.
I mean, I look back at a lot of the engagement we get, the folks that never really included me in the party and never really included me in the work that we do. And a lot of it, here, let me tell you a story. This is one of the big reasons why I was never included. Back in Tempe, and we're going to talk to a Tempe representative in just a little bit today, thankfully, in next episode, I guess. But I ran for office. I lost my first race. I think it was about 187 votes, if I'm not mistaken, that I lost by my very first race. Harry Mitchell is the state senator. Harry Mitchell decides he is going to resign his state Senate seat and run for Congress against J.D. Hayworth. This opens up an opportunity for someone to be appointed to that state Senate seat. At that moment, I felt I had worked my butt off. I had knocked on doors for a year straight. I had registered, probably increased Democratic performance by 2 or 3% in the district, closing our gap. Gotten to know a ton of people. So obviously, Sisto, I said, well, why not me? 25 years old, worked really hard, proved myself to many of the people in Tempe. And so I threw my name in, and you have to go out and get certain amount of precinct committee members to nominate you for a possible appointment. So I did my work. I got the most amount of precinct committee members to nominate. Around this time, when that nomination period is happening, I get a call from someone within the Tempe world, and they said, hey, you should really back off. You should let Harry pick who he wants to be his successor for his seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really sit well with me, Sisto. I mean, I think you know me well enough that asking me to stand down or back off is not the type of
we try, people.
Challenge,
we try,
right?
We try to pull the
what are they
reins
thinking?
on Eddie, but is Eddie gonna do it? Eddie does.
It forces me to say and double down into that effort. So I said, no. The precinct committee members have all aligned, and you know what? There's a chance to vote. So we go to we go to the district meeting. We're in this district meeting, and as the process is happening, the district chairperson, Bruce Martin, decides, hey, let's take a pause. Let's take a pause. And I'm sitting in the audience like, why are we taking a pause? And there's a couple names that were gotten through that were going to be considered. He asked me to go into the back of the room, and we enter this closet, swear to God, and it's Bruce, it's Harry Mitchell, and myself. And I remember both of them looking at 25-year-old Eddie, pointing their fingers and saying, you need to take your name out of the running for this appointment. This is my seat. I should be able to pick who I want to fulfill my term. And Sisto, if the first call didn't get me to back down, what do you think I did in this closed room off from the public with two party leaders, what the person they call the godfather of Tempe,
Mm-hmm.
who challenged me to take my name out of the running and not get appointed to the state Senate. I didn't use any cuss words, Sisto, but I think the expression on my face probably told them exactly what they knew I was thinking. I said, I absolutely disagree with you. You have no right to ask me this. I opened up the door, walked out, sat down next to my campaign team, and waited for the procedures to happen. And I got a little bit more aggressive in that room. I've shared that story only a couple times, and it is a sad story. But that's the type of story that happens in politics, Sisto. That's the type of story that forces people to, sort of get out of politics and hide away.
Well, but
and it's why you and I elbow our ways up.
And I think
no
and that's why I tell a lot of people that want to get involved in this contact sport that is politics is that if you really want to get in it and you really want to, and you really care about the values that you want to have heard at the table in a meaningful way, you know, you don't have to wait your turn. And in my, you know, I'm the only, a former state party chair reminds me of this every time I see him. I'm the only 4-time chair of the Young Democrats in the state's history. There's never been anybody who served 4 terms. Now, the funny part is I was in my early 20s. I think I turned 21 the weekend I met everybody in Arkansas for the first time at the national convention. And I remember saying to myself, you know, I did 2 terms, 21. So that would have made me 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And then I sat out for another 6 years and came back in my early 30s, right? And I served 2 more terms in my early 30s and my mid 30s, because they kick you out when you're 35, right? And so, so I think I actually carried over a year because I was 35, and I think I turned 35 halfway through my term, and then I was 36. I'm one of those October weird babies, so you know it happens at a weird time. But in that, these guys are telling me, you know, you're the only 4-term guy that we've ever seen. And I was actually talking with another person the other day we were talking about, you know, the curse of the young Democrat president in New Mexico is that not many of us ever elevate to anything other than president of Young Democrats. There's only one other individual who ever elevated himself to pro tempore of the legislature. But other than that, we don't really go anywhere else. And
well, I love that story, Sisto, because there's one of the races that you ran. Kate Whitland ran against Joaquin Rios for Young Democrat president in Arizona.
Yeah.
And today you can look back. Joaquin, I love the guy. He's amazing.
Yeah, I love Joaquin too.
Kate Whitland Gallego is now mayor of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And Joaquin is her chief of staff or a policy advisor somewhere in the process. But the point is, like, you know, there is a curse about being the state party chair or state party Young Democrat.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm saying that's New Mexico. I'm not saying that happens throughout the entire West, but the interesting part has been for me is that the folks that I served with, my vice president, my first term was Maggie Toulouse Oliver, who is now the Secretary of State of New Mexico. One of my judicial appointee chairs is Senator Mo Maestas. He is now the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee in the New Mexico State Senate. One of the county chairs of the Santa Fe County Young Democrats, now U.S. Senator Ben Reno. So you can move around to something bigger if you don't want the big job. But I was great. Yep. But it was great to have that experience and be able to understand how the party works and work within the party and work with all of these phenomenal individuals who I constantly remind all the time, I'm a better person because I know you guys. I'm a better person because of Maggie Toulouse Oliver. I'm a better person because of Senator Lujan. I'm a better person because of Senator Maestas. We didn't always agree all the time. Along the roads, we've had our little battles, but at the same time, I don't think that any of us have ever not respected who we were. Now, the funny part in all of that is we constantly hear from this next generation of Democratic leaders who are coming in. And back then it was funny because I remember having these conversations. You know, I was the guy that actually worked with elected officials, like the guys in the legislature. One of the representative I was talking about, he was in leadership that was closer to my age. And people were like, you need to take him out. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I just didn't feel comfortable being that guy. There was a couple of opportunities. He resigned. I could have taken his seat. There was party people that wanted me to do it. There was another elder party statesman. I didn't want to, get into a battle with him. Another time, party leadership came to me and said, hey, we want you to run against the state senator. The governor's pissed off and they want to get rid of him. And I said, I can't, because I made a commitment to that state senator that I would never run against them. And that goes back to where I come from. Of some of the values that I have was my dad used to tell me all the time. He used to, and I've said this before, my dad always felt bad because, he didn't teach us how to be rich is what was his big deal. You guys are never going to be rich because I'll never taught you how to be rich. And, but he did teach us the value of our word. And once you gave somebody your word, that was it. And so I've kind of tried to keep that as a tenet in my career in politics in New Mexico. I have a very tough time of lying, which, I mean, God forbid people believe it. Some of us don't lie. Spin is different than lying. Okay, that I just totally believe that. But some folks just blatantly lie. But does that put us in a position where other folks should be fearful about getting engaged in politics, period? No. If two guys like me, if little old Sisto from little old Veguita, New Mexico, can muscle his way through the Democratic Party in New Mexico to land to have a podcast and to be called on by numerous agencies as a voice of policy and politics in the state of New Mexico, I think everybody else has a shot too, don't you, Eddie?
I think there's good opportunities. We've been critical of the young people coming in politics, and maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just the fact that, I look at you and I, and we did a lot of work, right? We worked hard to get through. I do think there's a new generation of folks that just doesn't want to work. And that's upsetting. There's a whole generation of people that apparently get paid to flood municipalities and protest for no other reason but protest alone, apparently. Sisto, I know that you and I were talking a little bit about our own historical narratives, but I think something that is striking to me in our next segment on Cactus Crossfire is that we are hitting this point in American society where rational dialogue, it becomes muted, where the ability to talk to each other becomes almost a bad thing, Sisto. And honestly, I think immigration as an issue is one of the more poignant topics that really exemplifies this divide, right? What's happening in Minneapolis is not new. Let's be clear. I mean, these protests, these walks, these marches, none of this stuff is new, Sisto. It's what's interesting to me is just sort of the aggression that we've seen come from a certain segment of the left on this. And that's something I've never seen before. We used to see a lot of peaceful protests, right? We honor the lineage of many peaceful protesters who spent, Cesar Chavez, like, the Southwest, the work he did with, farm workers, and the peaceful protest that he engaged individuals in the demand for dignity and respect. And now fast forward to 2026, where you've got people going up to law enforcement officers, spitting on them, calling them racial epithets. I mean, the images, listen, these cell phones are great, but they're also the most incriminating tools out there to show, I think, the really nasty side of protest, or people who, honestly, many of them are probably mentally ill. Let's call it for what it is. It's disgusting what they're doing to people in law enforcement.
You know what, Eddie?
And
so here we go. I honestly think that this is the reason why we're seeing what we're seeing now. You're talking about Cesar Chavez. You're talking about Martin Luther King. You're talking about peaceful protest. You're talking about the tenets of Mahatma Gandhi that he used at that time for peaceful protest. I think that the thing that we often forget is that there was a time in the 1960s where people outside of the civil rights movement, which I think you take the civil rights movement, which was a peaceful protest type of a situation with African Americans and Hispanic Americans, Latinos, versus, say, the anti-war movement during that same time period. the Vietnam War movement. And
Yep.
I think that the big
The
difference,
yuppies, right? The yuppies that came out.
and I think that is a big difference. I mean, I think that some of those baby boomers, because that's who they are, they're all boomers, right? Those baby boomers have skipped over a generation of Generation X and more with millennials and Gen Z to say to them, you need to become more radicalized. You need to be more like we were in the 60s and the 70s. And I mean, you look at some of those anti-war protests during the 60s and the 70s, and they got pretty rough.
Yeah,
the stuff
68, remember what happened at the Democratic National Convention?
What happened at the Democratic National Convention. But what also happened in 68 at the Democratic National Convention was that you had a Democratic mayor who said, if they spit on you, we hit. Sound familiar? Okay. And
unbelievable.
And the interesting part about that is that I don't think in any instance either protesters or individuals should be disrespectful to either side of where you're at. But the frustration of these individuals has risen to levels that warrant that type of reaction on both sides. And I honestly believe that there has, and in these ICE situations, specifically these ICE situations, okay, because we didn't see this happen so much after George Floyd with police officers, right? I mean, there was a couple of instances where there was some people that got out of hand in their protests, and they were actually trying to start looting and stuff like that. I mean, that happened here in Albuquerque. I remember it very clearly. But
apparently looting's happening in Minneapolis as well.
Well, but see, that's what I'm saying is that in those instances, in the George Floyd situation versus this situation, I think local law enforcement has been better trained to de-escalate a situation than these ICE agents are trained. And we talked about this in our last conversation. I think that this is, a lot of folks want to get into the idea that this may be about political theater and these people are paid and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's a dance on both sides.
It mirrors. I know, but look at what happened in 68, right? And the aggression that was going on there. And I know I was wrong. They are not the yuppies that were protesting, Sisto. Yuppies are probably more the Republicans that were out in Wall Street making money. It was the yippies that protested, and these yippies that came out in 1968 and created these theatrical protests. I mean, I remember learning about some of this stuff. Abby Hoffman, right? Those folks, and they did absolute extreme crazy stuff. But I also remember there was no assault on law enforcement. And something has changed today.
I wouldn't say the Abby Hoffman movement was devoid of law enforcement assaults.
Okay, you're right.
I mean,
you're right. Black Panther movement, there was a lot of aggression against law enforcement.
And I'm not sure it was Black Panther. The only ones that I can remember there was that much aggression towards law enforcement was the Weathermen. During
Weathermen,
they were actually actively bombing places, and those guys fled and escaped prosecution for many, many years, and people in law enforcement did lose their lives, and that's kind of where we had a lot of conversation during the Obama administration that that's where they elevated the conversation at, right? But with all of that, I think that we can't, the thing that we want to do here on Cactus Crossfire, at least I want to do here on Cactus Crossfire, is I want to make sure that people are one, coming to a place where they're able to get information, where they're able to make their own decisions, right? We're going to just present it. We're going to give our thoughts on it. But at the same time, do your homework, right? Do your homework, figure out where you're going to land on a lot of these issues. But don't let...
Sisto, that homework, and I know you want to move to this, but doing that homework is so important on this issue, Sisto. You and I know that the fights that happen around immigration. I think I was remembering I remember the categorical move when we went away from the phrase illegal alien. You remember that? But it was Bill Clinton who just used that phrase on his State of the Union speech so frequently. And then within the party, no, it's such an alien is such a demonizing, just sort of a fear-mongering phrase. You got to move on. And then, he said, I remember this, Bill Clinton said, we are a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. Well, what other two presidents repeated that exact same phrase? Barack Obama on his State of the Union said, we are a nation of immigrants, but we are a nation of laws. And what did he then proceed to talk about? How he's going to use ICE to arrest criminal individuals. And then his phrasing was undocumented individuals. And then Biden moves forward and Biden got even more, codified. Individuals with overstayed visas or that do not have a visa that have criminal activity in this country will be arrested and deported by ICE. I think the key about making a decision on immigration and what we're seeing, Sisto, is recognizing that parties have operated in this space collaboratively throughout our entire political history. Immigration has always been a concern. I mean, what is there? Only 85,000 H-1B visas given out every year for the brightest, the smartest, the most well sought after immigrants we want to come to this country. 85,000. And they have over 1 million applications each year. Immigration's an issue. I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it today, Sisto, but understanding our history, understanding where we came from, and that both political parties are very similar, right, in their application of the law. When I look at the protest, I wonder, is it truly paid theater, Sisto, or is it actually are there actual people that leave their jobs and aren't getting paid and standing on the streets protesting for a cause? I'm not sure.
I mean, I would have to say that at the end of the day is, you're absolutely 100% right. The ICE issue is an issue and is a problem. And I'll continue to say this until I see something else that gives me a sense of comfort with this initiative by this president. I'm the only person that I know right now that has been an American citizen personally that has been detained by ICE, other than the ones that are currently being detained by ICE. And I can tell you this much. When I was detained, it was a very calm takedown. What I am seeing now doesn't have that de-escalation factor to it. And when you say, I'm going to give people bonuses for just signing up, and we're running them through a 6-week course of how to interact with these populations and with these individuals, I think people could use a little bit more than 6 weeks. And
yep, I agree with you with that.
And so, I think that we need to look at the full picture. I think we're going to continue to have dialogue about it. But at the end of the day, this is an issue that's affecting us all right now. And I think that we've all got to be engaged in that. So our wrapping it up section of this show, tell me something spicy, tell me something prickly, and tell me something quickly. What do you got for me?
All right, I'll start, Sisto. Let me start with my spice for the day. This is the 30-year anniversary of Dolly the Sheep. Yes, Dolly the Sheep, named after Dolly Parton, our beloved country western singer for many reasons. But it is the 30 years. I remember, Sisto, when the conversation around cloning came out and it terrified the world. Everyone thought that it's only a matter of time until you see your brother walking down the street looking just like you, cloned and reproduced in this like very science fiction way. The reason why this is spicy is it's been 30 years, and yes, other livestock has been cloned. They have a whole new, those of you that are pet lovers that love your pet, apparently for a very small price, you can start cloning the process of your pet so that when your beloved pet dies, you can get Fifi number 2 to come and give you some love and preserve their memory for many, many more years. And to me, it's incredible. So that is my spicy take of the day. My prickly take, it's going to be a little aggressive, Sisto. My prickly take is YouTube star Mrs. Rachel Accurso. Miss Rachel, in her social media channels, gets engaged, and this is a person that sings to children. You know, A is for Apple. Well, apparently, A for her is anti-Semitism because she hearted a post that said, "Free America from the Jews." That's Miss Rachel. And then, everyone called her out on it. She quickly deletes it. Then she concocts some crazy story saying, I fell asleep or my thumb hit it or whatever. I meant to delete it and I loved it instead. Well, you go through the account. She engaged with the person that posted that for many, many other accounts. She's done these other, comments in the past where she's made and led anti-Semitic statements. So I truly don't think that the fat thumb mistake of Miss Rachel crosses mustard. I think she is hiding from the criticism she's getting for her anti-Semitism and for engaging, trying to do shock doctrine and click grabbing through through these Hamas supporting groups that talk about exterminating Jews. I think people like her need to be held accountable. And if she finds out that C is for canceled, good for you, Miss Rachel. And my quickly take, Sisto, the Winter Olympics are upon us. And I can't use the F word, but I will say, freak Canada, Sisto. We hate Canada. As American fans of the USA, of the best country in the world that's supporting our Winter Olympic teams, particularly My Heart Hockey, quickly take is, I hope every Canadian athlete doesn't even make a medal stage. I think they're at 4th place looking in, and let the U.S. stand on that gold platform. So go USA. Sisto, what is your spicy take?
So my spicy take is we just saw the Grammy Awards. Album of the Year. My boy, my homie, my compadre, my hermano, Bad Bunny, first Spanish album named Album of the Year by the Grammys. Amazing accomplishment for Bad Bunny. Amazing accomplishment for Latinos. A wonderful way for us to go into my prickly take is this coming weekend, Super Bowl Sunday. Bad Bunny will have more viewers than ever before of any Super Bowl halftime show in the history. And it will also be one of the performances that gets up there with Whitney Houston's rendition of the American anthem. And something quickly, everybody's got to have a good grasp this year on their taxes. This year, you will have more extensions of their income taxes than anybody else because of all the new cuts to the IRS, and where this administration won't have time to process all of these IRS tax forms that are coming in at the end of the year. So that's my quickly, and I hope that we can have a more robust conversation as we're moving into the next year.
I heard, Sisto, before you log off, that you are serving carrots for your Super Bowl party. And with that, Cactus Crossfire, it was great. Sisto, you want to sign us off?
Till next time, we'll see y'all soon.
Peace.